Lisa Barthel-Winkler was a German writer. She was born in 1893, was an editor of the Karl May Verlag, and was married to writer and journalist Friedrich Barthel, whom she met in 1918. She died in 1966. Her 1922 novel Die Schlafende Hölle, or The Sleeping Hell, takes place in colonial India. Talora, the daughter of an outcast pariah mother, is abandoned by said mother when she joyously offers herself as a human sacrifice to Kali. A young girl, not knowing her mother is dead, is picked up by John Darrow and his half-Indian wife Dominia, who decides to adopt her. Many years later, after Dominia's death, John Darrow is visited by his former student John Leslie, whom Talora falls madly in love with, and who is too embarrassed to tell her he already has a fiancée. It turns out his fiancée Lillian is Talora's half-sister, and Lilia's father was a British soldier who fell in love with Talora's mother and was forced to leave the country before she was born. Talora never finds out any of this, even after the violent murder of Lillian's father. Ashudar, a wandering mystic who plans to destroy the British and who falls in love with Talora, helps Talora murder Lillian and to magically assume her form, so she can live with Leslie as his wife. A bit of the old inverse Uther Pendragon there. But soon she leads him to drown in the same underground temple devoted to Kali where she murdered the real Lillian. Ashudar meanwhile magically turns several Indian girls into amnesiac beauties who go out to spread the plague among the British both in India and abroad. Sadly, the Talora plot gives way towards the end to Ashudar's maniacal plotting, which is so broad and non-specific it feels more like us being given a lecture on the evils of colonialism, and the plot sort of falls apart. In 1897, a writer using the pseudonym Oudeis, identified potentially as the Reverend Christopher Lovett Darby, published Hell, a Tale. A man strikes up an unlikely friendship at university with a reclusive lecturer named Mundal, who spends most of his time smoking in his rooms with his pet ape. Mundal leaves behind some papers relating to how his dead lover Enid started appearing to him after her sudden death in a train crash, after the two had both agreed that if one of them winds up in hell, the other will follow. Enid winds up in hell, where the devil initially toys with her, like sticking her under a microscope and finding out all the sinful aspects of her soul. Mind you, this is one of those novels where the characters continuously declare how deserving they are of eternal damnation, but at best can only reference vague anonymous bad deeds they supposedly did, with really nothing ever brought up that is even remotely that bad. It's a weirdly, absolute saintliness is a mandatory requirement for all people type Calvinist mindset. But during her travels she does squeeze her way into a hall of mirrors that reveals a person's true soul, and climbs up a mountain to get a glimpse of heaven, while people fall off in the ascent into eternal darkness. The novel concludes by saying how when Jesus died he went to preach a sermon in hell like a lecture. Andrew Haggard was a British soldier and writer. He was born in 1854, the son of barrister William Maybourne Rider Haggard and poet Ella Dufton. He was the brother of H. Rider Haggard and Edward Arthur Haggard. Andrew served in the British Army in Egypt during the time of the Mahdist revolt, resigning his commission in 1886 due to his health. He married 3 times, first in 1880 to Mary Jane Dixon, who died a year later, then in 1883 in Cairo to Emily Isabella Churnside, whom he divorced in 1906, and that same year he married Jenny Ethel Fowler in Boston. He died in 1923. We will cover his 1889 Leslie's Fate and Hilda or the Ghost of Erminstein. The first story concerns a dying Scottish lord, relating to his friend Venables how once he set out to find the source of a local river near his ancestral castle, and stumbled upon a magically conjured up pocket dimension, as you do, with a crocodile-infested river and an Indian temple inhabited by a single woman named Lakshmi. He falls in love with her and she tells him how her father had fashioned the realm, which they call Feliciana, to keep her safe from the outside world. Soon after giving birth to a son, she falls ill and tells him to promise her he will never marry again, saying she would have to avenge herself if he does. He agrees, but years later falls in love with and marries the widow of his friend, his new wife getting stung to death a month later by a cobra inhabited by the dead woman's spirit. Hilda or the Castle of Erminstein is much simpler. Hilda falls in love with a certain Luis, but her cousin Frederica also loves him and would have her revenge. She tries to lock them inside a haunted chamber, then convinces them to go there at night. where Hilda is frightened to near death by a bloodthirsty ghost knight who massacres the ghost of a young woman in front of them. Frederica relents, and the dying Hilda makes Luis and Frederica promise to get married.